Hi, my name is Richard Deseriga from Microsoft, and in this video we're going to explore a solution, a pattern for being able to time bomb external user sharing in SharePoint Online. So I've seen a big insurgence of organizations going to leverage Office 365 for things like extranet and maybe OneDrive capabilities, and one of the big factors is how easy it is to share content externally. I can share maybe an entire team site with an external user, or maybe individual files within that team site or OneDrive site. And so the thing is when I go and share this content, it's basically shared until someone actually goes in and manually revokes that access. So ultimately, a lot of these external users might have access for something forever. And so what this solution is really keying on doing is being able to specify some sort of expiration window. And ultimately, towards the end of that expiration window, if the user who originally shared the content doesn't basically extend that sharing, we'll time bomb the share. We'll actually go and revoke access for that external user. So we're going to give our internal users the ability to both extend those shares or go ahead and let it revoke. So first, it would help to explain a little bit about the sharing process within SharePoint Online. The first step for being able to share content is actually to enable sharing on a site collection. And so the place that I might do that is in the SharePoint Admin Center that I'm at right here. And so I have a number of different site collections, and for any one of these, I can select on it and click on the sharing button in the ribbon, and that will show me 3 sharing options. So first of all, as you can see here, in this case, I am not sharing this site at all. So right now, external sharing is turned off. However, I have the option to do 2 ways of external sharing. One is I will allow external users, but they have to be authenticated. So that's the second option. And then finally, there's the get a link option, where as long as they have a link to that content, a unique link, then we'll give them access to those files. And so of these 3 options, we're really, for the most part, going to be looking at this option 2, which is really how Microsoft internally has it set up. We have it to where we can share most of our SharePoint Online content with external users, but they have to be authenticated. So for me to turn on external sharing, I could simply select this middle checkbox, click Save, and then the SharePoint Admin Center will go to work on enabling the different things that it needs to in order to make that site externally shareable. Once it's shareable, a user can very simply go and share any sort of content, either the site itself or individual files or folders within the site. So I have a team site here, and I can simply, up at the top, I have an option to share this site. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on that share button. And I have a couple options here. I can see the individuals that it's already shared with. So you can see I have a few different people that this is being shared with. But I also have the ability to actually invite people. And ultimately, any email address should work if we have external sharing turned on. Now, the way Microsoft will recognize that email address is through a verification process on the external user's end. So if it's an email address Microsoft already knows about, like an organizational account or a live ID type of account, we'll automatically recognize that and they would be able to get in to use the content. If it's a email that we don't recognize, Microsoft will send them through a verification process just so that we ensure that it's theirs. So, what I'll do is I'll invite a few people here. First of all, I'm going to invite someone named Sarah D. And I'm going to invite Sarah from Contoso Petroleum. And you can see it will resolve basically any email address. And so you can see that it's resolving that I can select it in my people picker. And then ultimately I can go and click share. I'm going to do one more because there's a little bit of a difference when I go and share some of these. So you can see it's telling me that it was shared with external users. There's one more share that I'm going to do here. And in this case, it's going to be maybe another user. I'll do a live ID here. So I'll do Deseriga at Outlook. And you notice that in this case, it's actually already showing me that deseriga@outlook.com. And it even has the name for that user. And that's because even though that user hasn't never been used within this site, that external user has been shared with somewhere within our tenant. So that's why it's resolving it, because we've ultimately resolved that user at some point somewhere in our tenancy. And so I'm going to go and click on this, and there's a really important reason for showing you both of those, both Sarah that hadn't been recognized, and in this case, this Richard who has. So I'll go ahead and click share here. And what we'll see is as we go to try to see where we can get a listing of the external users, there's going to be a difference between how Sarah is represented and how I am represented, that Outlook.com account that I just did. So where I can go see this, well, one place that I can see this is in site settings. So if I go to site settings, one of the things that happens once I start sharing with external users is it actually will generate what we call an access request list. And so you can see that right here. I have this thing called access requests and invitations. And if I click on that, what you're going to see is I'm going to see some pending invitations and then a history of all my other invitations. And the really interesting thing here is I can see Sarah, right? Sarah's one of those two that I just shared with, but the other user, Richard, who did resolve in the people picker, is not being displayed, right? So ultimately, this is a SharePoint list behind the scenes. But what this tells me in building a solution to look for external users, this isn't going to be reliable, because what happens here, it's only going to add users that haven't been resolved within our tenant before. And in this case, Sarah, of those two, was the only one that hadn't been resolved. So you might say, well, where can I actually get a list of all the external users? And it's not within the site collection. It's actually not even within the SharePoint Admin Center. I actually have to go all the way to Office 365 admin portal in order to see that. So here I am in the Office 365 admin portal. I'm on the landing dashboard. And one of the things you'll see in the side navigation, this is kind of the new side navigation, is they actually have an area for external sharing. And if I were to expand that and click on sites, you'll see all the different sites that are set up for external sharing. What we're going to do is go find our test 2 team site. So I'm going to go through our list here, and here we go on page 2. Here's that test 3 site. And if I select this, what it's going to do, it's going to load a real list of all the users that have been invited, external users that have been invited into this site. And you can actually see here, it actually says there are 7, right? And that's a really different view from when we were on that access request list. If I looked at this, it looks like we've only shared the site with 4 people total outside of our company. But in reality, if I go back here, you can see it's actually 7 users. And if I actually click on the link here, I can see all 7 of those user accounts. And look, for the first time, we can see some of those additional accounts like deseriga@outlook.com, right? And so that's a really important distinction is, you know, those users that have already resolved, I'm going to have to come out here in order to find that. Now, the good thing is we actually provide in some of the Office 365 admin assemblies of CSOM, we actually give you the ability to go out here and look at this list for a site. And so we're actually going to use this, but there's another problem with this list is it's not complete. One of the things we need is when an external user's access is about to expire, we need to be able to send the person who invited them a warning so that they can either extend that share or go ahead and revoke it. And what you see here is that our invited by is actually missing for quite a few of these. So if I were to just illustrate it here, it doesn't look like the deseriga@outlook.com, Garth, Pavel, or Rich Diz have an invited by, right? They seem to be missing here. So I don't have any values. And what's interesting is these happen to be the user accounts that were already previously resolved within our tenant. So because they theoretically weren't originally invited from within the site collection. They were invited from another site collection. So we're going to go to yet another place to go and find who invited them. So our place to find that is actually back within the site collection. So inside the site collection, there's actually a user list. So if I go to catalogs/users, this is the user information list. It's a hidden list, but it lists all the users of this site. And we can see, all the different users that have come in and validated, authenticated for at least one time within this site. They'll show up here. So some of our users like Sarah aren't showing up yet because she's never signed in. But as soon as she does, we'd actually see her showing up in this list. Now the cool thing is this list is available via our REST APIs very easily. So I can easily use the REST APIs to do things like get the created by, or maybe actually the created by is not going to be useful for us, but we can get the real creation date. Because that's the other thing, is we need to know when the site was actually shared. And although our admin, when we go to this list here that's in that's at the tenant level, it will give us all the external users, but it's going to have whenever they were originally first introduced into the tenant. So for instance, that Desirga at outlook.com, I first shared that in this tenant, that user, like a year ago. And so it'll look like that user's had access for like a year, but that's not true. It was just within the last few minutes that I shared with it. And therefore, this user information list is going to be very valuable for us to go and query to get the real creation date or the real share date for this site. Okay, so that's a little bit of background on external sharing and the different places that we're going to have to go. We're going to need to use the tenant object for administration and be able to go and get all those external users. And then for each one of those external users, we need to go and resolve the real share date from this user information list. So let's take a look at the solution that's going to bring all of this together. There are 3 components to our solution. So if I bring this up and we look inside of Solution Explorer, you will see that there are 3 projects. First, we have a console application that's basically going to act as like a timer job. We'd schedule this to run every night, go through all our site collections, and process all of the different external users. We'll do things like look for users that have expired, external users that have expired, and we might look for entirely new external users that we want to be able to track. So every night we'll go run this and we'll clean out anything that's gone, we'll add new items, and then we'll process any sort of warnings or expirations that we need to. We're going to need a repository to keep track of all this. So if we run this every night, we need to be able to look and see, what's new, what's old, and our method of that is going to be SQL Server. Specifically, eventually it'll be SQL Azure when we deploy this out to Azure. So our console application will be deployed to like a web job in Azure. We'll have a SQL Azure database, and it's actually just a single table. If I were to look at this table here, what you'll see is I have simple things like the site collection, their login name, who invited them, what the original share date was, some basic information just to track that external user for a site collection. Finally, we have a web application, because what we're going to do is inside this solution, we not only have a cutoff threshold, so maybe in 60 days, we're going to cut off external user access, but we also want a warning, maybe 10 days prior to that. So 50 days into a share, maybe we want to start sending the original inviter a warning that the user's about to lose access and they need to either extend it or revoke it. And so a web application is what we're going to use. It's going to be an MVC app that's going to allow a user from an email they get to go and view the details of the share and choose to either revoke it, extend it, or ignore it altogether. And if they ignore it, it'll eventually revoke using the timer job. So those thresholds really are the key to running this solution. If we look in the app config, you'll see that I have 2 really key values that are specified in here: our warning duration and our cutoff duration. So if you look at this, our warning duration says that within 50 days, anything over 50 days, we're going to send a warning to whoever originally invited that external user. And then after 60 days, if the timer hasn't been reset, we're actually going to revoke access for that user. So these are the really two key things for the logic of this solution. And so what I'm going to do is right now, this test site that we were in, it's actually not that old. So it's not even 50 days old, so it wouldn't generate any warnings. But let me just show you that running. And just to be really clear here, I actually, for the purpose of this video, I've just hard-coded a single site. So we're going to go and just process maybe team site 3. In reality, what you would do is one of two things. One is you can use some of our patterns and practices for enumerating all the site collections. And you could go through all of them because this is using tenant permissions. And so it could go through all your normal site collections and all the OneDrive sites. So you can see here I have a few OneDrive site URLs that I've processed in the past with this solution. The other option, instead of iterating through those sites, if you own the provisioning process, which we're big fans of in our patterns and practices, owning that provisioning process, you can do a lot of really cool things. One of those is when a user says, hey, I want a new site collection, we can actually store that in a database. So I have a really quick way of going and querying all the site collections versus using another approach like maybe the site's ASMX. So lots of approaches, but for the sake of this demo, we're just going to process a single site collection, which is the team site we were in earlier. So there's quite a bit of code that occurs in here. I'm going to put a couple of breakpoints down at the bottom that's actually doing the checks for either a cutoff, where we need to revoke access, or send a warning email. And we'll take a look at how this runs. So I'll go ahead and play this. And again, this first time we go through, we shouldn't have actually any warnings or any revokes because the site's not old enough to even have those. So we'll go ahead and play it. And this takes a little bit to run. You can see that it's a console application, but it runs really well in like an Azure web job that I can put on a schedule. Again, very easy to run this every night. Okay, here's our first external user. I can go and look at the details of this external user if we go and hover over this. So I can see this is Alex D at contosopetro.com. They were originally shared this site on, looks like August the 19th at 9:42 p.m. Now, the interesting thing here is I have the days active, and if you see there, it's 2.95 days. So they've had access for almost 3 days, but the cutoff duration is 60. So it's not going to be a cutoff. So we'll go ahead and walk over this. And so the next thing it's going to check is should we send a warning email message. And you can see that the warning duration is 50 days. So again, we're not even at 3 yet, so it's not going to send a warning either. So I'll go ahead and play this. And again, we have a number of, we have 7 external users in this site, so it's going to hit our breakpoints a few times. And again, none of these should actually go in and send any sort of emails or warnings in this case. It should really just go through. Okay, so it's done. Now what I want to do is maybe tweak our code around a little bit. I'm going to go back to our app config, and instead of putting our warning duration at 50, let's set it at 2. So now what we're going to do is anything that's 2 days or more into sharing, we want to send a warning. And actually, just to show you that there's no smoke and mirrors going on here, first of all, I'm here as Alex. That's our external user. And let me actually grab our site URL. So we'll go back to our team site. And Alex should have access to our site. So let's go ahead and grab this URL. We'll go back to Alex's browser. And if I paste this in here, Alex should have access to our team site 3. And sure enough, there you can see he's in as an external user. Now he doesn't have the full getting started because again, he's just a contributor of this site. So, and also I want to go over here maybe to my Outlook. And we're going to quickly take a look. And I have some old shares here, but I'll go ahead and delete these. All right, so let's actually now run this. So this should generate some emails. I don't have any emails in here discussing an expiration of an external user, but now that I've set this warning duration to 2, if I play our application again, our console application is going to go through, do the exact same thing it did before, but in this case, we should have reached our threshold. So here's our first test. Again, active days is 2.95. And now when I step into this, you can see it's going in to send that warning email. So we're going to go and send an email. We're actually using CSOM, so it's actually going to send the email using SharePoint. So we'll go ahead and let that go. We'll let it do it again. And so I'm actually should be getting a number of email come in here. And actually, you can actually hear them coming in right now. They're cranking in because all of these users I actually shared at the same time. So it's good. It should generate warnings for every one of these external users. And maybe this one more. There we go. So it's done. And if I go back to my mail, you can see we have a bunch of Team Site 3, action required, external sharing for Alex D is about to expire. And this one I see external sharing for Ann is about to expire. External sharing for Garrett, external sharing for Garth, external sharing for Pavel. And you can see within this email, I have 3 options of what I can do. I can go view the details. I can go directly to an extend for another 60 days. And that's actually an important note here is actually it's reading the configuration to know that our expiration window is 60 days. And then the third option is I can revoke access. And so there's a lot of detail. It's telling us that it's actually going to terminate in 57 days. So there's a lot of detail within this message. Now, if I ignored this message for another 57 days, that timer job would ultimately revoke our user. But let's actually use this app, the web application, to view the detail and perform an operation as a user. So the console application, again, that's something that would be run by as like a scheduled task. I think Azure is a great place for that. But I'm going to run the web application now. So I'm going to set that as the start project because we're going to debug it. So I'm going to set it as the start project and go ahead and press play. And now what I'm going to do is go back to my inbox. And now that I'm debugging, these links will actually work. So I can do a few things. I can click on view detail. And what that'll do is that will take me into our expiration warning. And this is an MVC app, so it has all the great responsive with Bootstrap. But ultimately, it gives me all the details. It tells me the external user, the site collection, when it was originally shared. So it was on the 19th at 9:42. And then I have 2 buttons that I can do here. One is I can extend the access for another 60 days in this case, or I can revoke the access. And so I'm going to actually skip Alex here. Let me actually go view a different one. So let's do maybe, let's see, who is this? This is Ann W. So I'll go view the details for Ann. And again, it shows me that it's Ann. And in this case, I'm going to extend the access. So I'm just going to click on this extend button. And it's going to give me a confirmation that the external access has been extended. And actually, if I were to rerun our timer job, I shouldn't get a warning anymore for Ann because it reset the clock for her for another 60 days. And in another 2 days, I'll get a warning because we set that warning way down. But ultimately, it automatically extended her. So I'm going to do one more thing here is just to go back as Alex. We haven't messed with permissions at all. So if I were to refresh Alex here, not only is he going to still have access to the site, but if I go into the Office 365 portal and refresh this page, we'll see that Alex still has access. He still shows up as one of our external users for this site. Here he is right here. So now what I'm going to do is using our tool, here's Alex's warning that I got as the original inviter. I'm going to now revoke access. So I'm going to click on this revoke button and actually put a breakpoint within our controller. So you can see I'm going and getting that Team Site 3 site collection. And so we'll just step down here. I'm getting that access token. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and using this external share, one of the things that I have is the actual user ID for Alex D. And so what I'm going to do is go get that. I'm going to actually remove him as a site user. So that's actually going to completely remove him from this site. So we'll go ahead and step into this, execute that. Then I'm going to delete the record from our database. We no longer need to track him because he's been expired. You could just as easily modify the database and maybe mark it as inactive if you needed an audit trail of these things. But we'll ultimately save this, and then we'll take the user to a confirmation screen. So we can see external access has been revoked for Alex D. So now if we go back over as Alex D, what we should see is Alex D should no longer have access to our site. And we can see that he has access is denied. And actually, if I go back into the Office 365 portal and refresh our list, what we should see is that he's no longer showing up in our list. So you can see he's gone. And again, that was one simple action. It took very little to actually remove him all the way. Now, this doesn't do any other cleanup of the site collection. So if there was a bunch of unique permissions that were given by giving Alex access to things, we don't re-inherit permissions. So it's not an ideal solution from that standpoint, but to be quite honest, the way the usage model for things like OneDrive, there's going to be broken inheritance all over the place anyway. So I think this is still a really good solution for dealing with governance of some of those external users. So I can do one other thing here is, here we saw the user actually perform an action. The other thing that I could do, and I'm only going to process one of these because I don't want to lose all my external sharing of this site, is I'm going to ratchet down the cutoff duration. So I'm going to actually move warning duration to 1 day, and I'm going to move cutoff duration to 2. So what that's saying is after just 1 day of external access, we're going to send a warning to the person who invited the user. And after 2 days, we're actually going to revoke it completely if they don't extend that timer. So we'll go ahead and play this one more time, and I'm going to put a breakpoint here because I only want to remove one person. But we'll go ahead and run this once here. Oh, I need to set the startup project. Go ahead and set that back to our timer job and press play. So it'll take a second to get all the way through here because it has to do a bunch of reading. So here we go. We can see active days. In this case, this one's not going to process, but we'll go to the next one here. That one's not either. Here's one. So we have a 2.96 and the cutoff is 2. So in this case, it is actually going to go in and automatically remove this user. So let's actually see who this user is before I actually do it. So it looks like this is Garrett V at contosopetro.com. So before I actually let that run, let me go back here to external access, and here's Garrett V. You can see him in our list. So we'll go in and step into this time, and we can see here's the removal of the user. And then again, we need to clean up our record, so we'll delete the record and then go ahead and continue on. And now we're at our next user who would also delete. I'm going to stop this now. And what we're going to see now here is if I go back to our users, Garrett Vargas should be gone. So let's go ahead and refresh. It refreshes our list. And sure enough, Garrett is gone. So really cool solution. Leverages, we can leverage Azure for this. We can use a web job to run the console timer job portion. We can use SQL Azure to be that repository and an Azure website to allow users to go either extend or revoke. And I think this is a fantastic way to put some additional governance around external sharing versus just simply turning it on and off that might ultimately leave external users access to things forever. So this is the external user sharing time bomb solution that will be in the patterns and practices.